Can the Walt Disney Company's Marvel Studios stem some of the box office and merchandise bleeding that we've covered here on Valiant Renegade? Or do they plan to double down? Recent article from thatparkplace.com might have some explanations for us here. The toy industry insiders, Marvel planning for race swaps for the X-Men. And for that, we have WDW Pro from thatparkplace.com here to discuss some of those details, along with some other interesting tidbits from this article. But that's not all, because it seems this is going to bleed over into Lucasfilm and Star Wars as well.
I would have to think that there's a lot of pressure right now with Disney's partners as they go on a trip with Disney that they may not really want to go on.
Get ready. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, welcome back, folks. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's great to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video that are not yet subscribed, please take a moment, hit that little red subscribe button. If it is still red, turn it gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. YouTube algorithms love the comments. We love them too. We try to respond to as many as we possibly can. We got a lot to talk about today.
We've got sources within the toy industry, and they're just using us at this point. So happy to be used.
Yeah, I was going to say, use away. And for the folks out there watching, I think, Pro, that's a good opportunity to kind of just let folks know kind of how this works. Why do people inside the toy industry, why would they have this type of quote-unquote inside knowledge that we've been able to talk about? How would they know all of these little nuanced aspects of what's going on to Disney? And it's probably a good time to remind folks that when it comes to producing an intellectual property like a Star Wars or a Marvel that is so multifaceted, right? You want to create movies, you want to create TV shows, you create comic books, you create merchandise, action figures, Lego sets. All of that has to be planned out far in advance of an actual television show or movie's release, right? I mean, you've got to have 12, 24 months of planning and lead time. So a lot of the things that a Star Wars, a Lucasfilm, or a Marvel Studios is planning for a year or 2 years from now, they're already in discussion with merchandise folks, with retailers, and with manufacturers. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're building this franchise going forward, so you guys know what to put in the pipeline so that you have products ready to sell at the moment we drop these new properties, so that we, Disney, Marvel, Lucasfilm, can get paid some big, fat licensing checks.
When I get a leak out of someone connected to a theme park, they probably have a much different reason for sending that leak to me than somebody who's related to retail or to merchandising. And the same is true for movies or for streaming shows. And I think part of that is that when somebody sends information to me about a theme park, a lot of times they're just sending me something fun and interesting about a new parade that somebody who's working on floats has picked up, you know, as part of a third-party vendor, something like that. But when it comes to this merchandising stuff, a lot of these people have their entire careers staked on this. And it's like you said, it's 12 months of and beyond of research and focus groups and planning and determining what will constitute each and every character, especially as they're being retconned back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe or into Star Wars or what have you. And for a lot of these people, if the entertainment entity, so the movie or the show, what have you, if it does not perform well, then the merchandise won't perform well, and then that falls back on them. So they have a lot riding on this. Again, I don't want to assume that the industry experts who are sending us this information, I don't want to assume what their motivation is necessarily, but I would have to think that there's a lot of pressure right now with Disney's partners as they go on a trip with Disney that they may not really want to go on.
And as a good reminder on that end, Pro, Tuesday, November 8th, yes, is Election Day here in the United States, but it's also Disney Earnings Day. Not only is it the end of a fiscal quarter, a report for a fiscal quarter for Disney, but it's also the end of the fiscal year 2022 for Disney, September 30th, 2022. And this will be the earnings report. We're going to get a lot of additional information, more so than we get in the usual quarterly earnings call. So it's going to be interesting to see as we have this discussion today, what you and I are going to be reacting to live during the earnings call Tuesday, 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, U.S., on November 8th.
And I don't want to forecast one way or the other. And in fact, I probably think that Disney will have a fairly decent earnings call. But I will say that if I were a company, if I were in charge of a major global company and there was bad news on the way, I could pick no better day to pull out that bad news than on election day, because it's going to get buried.
Boom. Exactly. And I could not agree with that anymore. Google could make their earnings report that day, and it would be buried down the list. Apple could have done it that day, would have been buried down the list. But you're absolutely right. The Disney earnings report will largely kind of come and go, but we're not going to mess it. We will be here for it. We will be covering it, because anything that they would try to sneak by, we're going to catch it. But yes, I do agree. I think the parks will be fine. I think the parks will show a very good quarter. What I'm going to be interested to see is theatrical distribution, third-party revenue from things like merchandise licensing, which unfortunately they do not break out as an explicit line item. But that's what we're here to talk about today, because we've been covering the toy industry stuff, specifically related to Marvel and Star Wars, Walt Disney Company. We've been contacted, you've been contacted at that park place by some folks that are at high level in the know positions.
And let's just go ahead and say too, Valiant, that in order to make sure that this is not some giant canard, I've actually shared with you, and I don't think the source minds at all, but because you're obviously not going to out anybody or cause a problem, but I've actually shared with you some of the information we've got corroborating the source. So yes, everybody involved in this video knows that this is legit.
Yes. Well, we've seen the information. It's, as you said, it's been verified. We know where the sources are, what positions they're in, but that's as far as we say. But yeah,
we can't verify what they're telling us, but we know that this person probably should know what they're talking about.
Yes, it would be very, very strange for a person in this position to not have this level of solid information. It would be almost impossible for them not to know this stuff. The toy industry insiders, Marvel planning race swaps for the X-Men. So on the surface, for the audience out there, this seems like, oh, this again, right? I mean, we've seen them now doing this for some time, but we're going to talk about going forward, and we're going to give you some information that you've probably never heard or seen before into the specificity of what's going on inside these, frankly, wacko planning and writers' rooms that Marvel and Lucasfilm, which will be another follow-up article tomorrow on thatparkplace.com. So stay tuned.
But which we will discuss, in this video. So if you guys are starting to glaze over it all, which I know you can't possibly be doing so, but if you were thinking about coming back to this video later, hang in there, stay with us. We're actually going to do some exclusives that are not in the article that have to do with Star Wars. So, and don't skip ahead. You need this middle stuff too.
Yeah. It's all relevant. So, Pro, tell us about this article. Tell us about what the source has been communicating with you in the last few days.
Well, first of all, let's identify that not all race swaps are bad. So I would say there's two categories for race swaps. And the first category is one that we probably all like, and that's the merit-based race swap. You might think of like Samuel L. Jackson. And when there's somebody who can play a role and they are literally the person and you need to have that person, go for it. I love it, right? If you've got it, I don't care what the person's race is. If they are destined to play that character, go for it. But the second type of race swap in the movies is sort of this quota-based deal where it's all picked out and manufactured inside some corporate boardroom in order to meet, again, a quota. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. It seems that Disney, and you had to know this was coming, but that Disney is looking at race swapping some of the X-Men characters. And for right now, at least, the title is still X-Men, but they're looking at doing race swaps of those characters because they feel that, and this is coming out of them, allegedly, not me, but they are feeling that there are too many white characters, too many Caucasian characters in the X-Men. So the way that we would know that is through this person who's sending us this rumor. But they're saying that in the focus groups, in the research, in the market and development around the merchandising, that this has already been played out. So they already know this is coming. They want to bring in the Fox characters, so the X-Men characters that came in through Fox. And so I think this is saying that Hugh Jackman is confirmed, like what I've been saying. Hugh Jackman is probably confirmed for multiple movies. I think that you're going to see Patrick Stewart. I think that you're going to see Storm coming into these movies, obviously. And I'm sure they'll be trying to get more of these legacy actors and actresses. The thing is that this could be very much like what we've seen in recent Marvel movies, where you get a cameo and that cameo draws in the audience. They think that that character is going to have a much more poignant role in the film. And it turns out that they don't. And that character is just being used, one, to allow for merchandising of that character, and then two, so that Disney then can promote characters that you aren't as familiar with or who have been retconned in such a way that they wouldn't succeed on their own. And I think we've had plenty of that with the sequel trilogy of Star Wars, right?
Yeah, and even more recently, let's take Black Adam that's still in theaters right now. You know, one of the things that Warner Brothers tried to do with this movie was to spill the beans early that Henry Cavill was appearing again as Superman in this film. And the thought was that as the box office predictions for opening weekend were tepid at best, they were hoping that this would drive an additional maybe 15-20% plus traffic into theaters. Kind of didn't happen that way, and it fell off quickly. So the cameo thing may not work, especially if people look at this as you said, as the source kind of indicates, a cheap trick, right? They tried to do this with Doctor Strange, didn't really work. Again, big opening weekend, kind of hit a brick wall after day 5 and 6. I think that's what's going to continue, especially in this digital age where, quite frankly, the Henry Cavill appearance, 5 seconds of it in Black Adam, appeared all over YouTube and Twitter before the movie even came out. So people had gotten their fix. Oh, look, there he is. Okay, don't need to go pay $15 just to see that one shot. Already saw it on YouTube and Twitter. So I don't think that's going to change. And plus, again, there's a cost aspect to bringing these people in for these cameos, as we saw with Doctor Strange and a lot of reshoots. But let's look at this here.
What the source, one of the things the source says is that, and I'll just read this straight from them. They say, remember that part of the, quote, winning formula, unquote, for Disney going forward is cameos. Those add salary pressure, even if included in an actor's contract. Also, actor salaries are not subject to the various production subsidies that various states offer, as well as financing plays for different accounting posts. And so part of what they're saying is that Disney needs to get their budgets down, the production budgets. And you and I have talked about this over and over, that the production costs for Disney movies are very bloated. And that means that they have to reach these insane levels of revenue out of the box office to break even. But you can get around that and still have your big names if your big name comes in for a lower paying cameo, and then you race swap these characters that people really enjoy, but you race swap them with perhaps an actor that would not garner such a high cost as these legacy stars who come in, i.e. a Patrick Stewart or whatever have you. But that's one way that Disney can try to get these budgets down going forward in, I guess, phase 5 and phase 6 as they move forward in the MCU.
This is something that I've said for quite some time, especially when phase 4 rolled around, was that these production budgets that Disney continuously engages in are absolutely unsustainable. They're financially unsustainable long-term. They're untenable. You cannot continue to spend $200 million on Pixar films that absolutely tank at the box office. Even if they were doing relatively well, which Lightyear, you would think, would have been their best attempt at that, it failed horrifically, and a spectacular fail it was. And now we're looking at, Wakanda Forever, which is probably going to be another $200 million expenditure for Disney, which I don't care what projections say right now. I think they're going to be very wrong. I think that is a movie that's going to struggle to get past its break-even point, which could be $750 to $800 million, just like Thor: Love and Thunder, which that struggled. You can't keep spending this much money on these movies and expecting to eventually turn a profit when you have, as Disney has, cut their entire legs off post-theatrical, right? Because they're not going to Netflix anymore. They're not going to an Amazon Prime. There's nobody at the end of the rainbow after these Disney movies leave the theater to stroke Disney a check for $1 billion a year, as they do in the case of Netflix and Amazon Prime, to studios like Sony and Universal each and every year to get their entire slate. Disney has eliminated that third-party revenue in order to prop up Disney Plus, which, by the way, still isn't projected to make a dime in profit for about another 2 years. So all of this has to come into play at some point. They have got to get these movie budgets under control. What's distressing to me, though, Pro, from what you're saying or what your source is saying, it sounds like everything that they're trying to do with these films starts with one thing in mind. How do we racially or ethnically diversify the characters in these movies first? We'll worry about what to do with them and writing a story later, but how do we diversify this first? Is that a fair assessment?
Well, you know, it's not only just a fair assessment, but it's also funny that the source in some of the communications we've had outside of this article, so not everything that the source has sent us is in the article, but one of the things that they said is that some of the international merchandising partners, some of these people who work for the global companies in these various markets around the world, that they're looking at the Americans and thinking that they've gone cuckoo. And that's the wording that they have used here. They just don't understand why that race and social stuff has become so important to Americans and why the entertainment corporations are running towards it so hard. I mean, just think about we had an article on That Park Place today by John Golf about Halloween costumes, and he's dead on with it. The Halloween costumes this year are all the legacy characters. Yeah. You didn't see anybody dressing up as She-Hulk. You didn't see anybody dressing up as Moon Knight. You didn't see anybody dressing up as the sequel trilogy characters, right? There's no Kylo Ren's coming to your door.
I got news for you. I didn't see anybody dressing up as Black Panther.
Well, I saw one little Caucasian kid. It was quite the thing.
Okay, you told me that story, but it was a boy.
That's right.
There's no Black Panther anymore. There's Shuri, who's going to put on the Black Panther suit. And we talked about this on the Sunday Live show, showing pictures from Target, my local Target. Big Black Panther end cap of merchandise, right? And they had a slew of toys on there, action figures, gloves, costume pieces. There were 4 boxes on this end cap that had pictures of children, like actual children, like on the box, little pictures of them, playing with the toy that was in the packaging. 3 of those 4 packages showed little boys playing with the toys. 1 package had a little girl on it. This is a movie, Wakanda Forever, coming out that has 4 female characters as the leads, desperately trying to replace 1 male Chadwick Boseman.
That's right. And
that's where these toy manufacturers are right now. They're kind of in, holy crap mode. And let me tell you something.
None of the metrics for Black Panther look like this is going to be a highly successful movie. And so the retailers, like you're saying, they're looking at this and they're looking down the road and they're saying, oh my gosh, where are we being taken?
No. And this same source, if I'm not mistaken, in a previous article and video that we did, indicated to you that the licensing revenues going back to Disney have declined, I believe, somewhere to the tune of 30% because of all this.
That's right.
So I can only imagine this is only going to continue to get precipitously worse as the movies and the intellectual properties and all the other quote-unquote woke stuff, as some may want to call it, continues to perpetuate out into phases 5 and perhaps 6. And again, Mel Brooks once famously said in Spaceballs, merchandising, where the real money for the movies are made. That was the case up through phase 3 for the MCU. That was the case for 30 plus years with Star Wars. It ain't the case no more.
That's right. And, you know, the odd thing to me about all of this is you would think with all of the creative power at Disney, at Marvel, at Lucasfilm, that they could create compelling characters, compelling female characters, compelling characters of all different backgrounds, ethnicities, races, religions, abilities, yada, 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 that they could do that. And for some reason, they just can't. They continue to take existing characters and try to change them so that they'll check off all of the diversity boxes. But that is just the laziest way you could go about doing this. And it seems to me that the worldwide audience, and now the merchandising partners who contractually really can't say much, but it seems like everybody is coming to the same conclusion that this is just boring. People want inventive, exciting new characters, or they want their legacy characters to be empowered and be similar to the way that they remember them, but maybe even better.
And speaking of failures on grand magnitudes, let's talk
Shall we
about
get to the
Lucasfilm.
Exclusive?
Let's
Yes.
get to the exclusive. So this is new. This is an article that, as you're watching this video, probably may not have come out yet for thatparkplace.com, but it will.
I promise it is not there yet, but it will be in a few hours, ladies and gentlemen.
If you're
Hang
watching
tight.
this, if you're watching this in the first couple of 2 or 3 hours of this video dropping, you're getting this fresh.
There you
So,
go.
Pro, this same source also delivered some additional information regarding Lucasfilm. Things that we've seen kind of hinted of in the past, things that we've kind of always known from places like the god-awful Story Group, the Pablo Hidalgos, and all that kind of stuff. And now we're getting more confirmation from people that have been told how the process works at Lucasfilm, who are in the toy manufacturing and retail industry as part of this, as we talked about earlier, how these folks all have to work together to make these products. And in this case, we have a grand chart sitting somewhere in Lucasfilm, which we saw some pictures of, a few years ago. All the things they would lay out on this whiteboard to talk
I had
about.
forgotten that until you just mentioned it.
Yeah, the whiteboard in the writer's room of the Story Group. But go ahead, Pro. What else had you heard on this? Apparently, we have some more.
This one's a lot of fun because everybody commentating on Lucasfilm has always speculated that there must be something like this. And now here is somebody out of a major Disney merchandising partner who is part of the design process, let's say, of all this stuff. And they just out and out say what's going on. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's what's happening. According to our source, Lucasfilm has a diversity grid, which you're really not supposed to speak of like in writing. You're not supposed to call it out by name, but everybody just knows it exists and they know how it works and the formulas behind it, but you don't talk about it. You certainly don't put it in anything official. But they have a diversity grid. And one of the interesting things the source says is that Latino and Caucasian categories are merged together in this diversity grid used by Lucasfilm. So they say basically Diego in Andor is considered Caucasian, and that allows him to hit two birds with one stone in their diversity system they have, essentially eliminating the need for a white character whatsoever if you perceive white characters as being different than Diego. White men are so rejected at Lucasfilm that they would not authorize a TV show starring Obi Wan, Darth Vader, and Luke Skywalker. It was forbidden because there were too many white men. Even though they knew less people would watch and buy the merchandise, they had to rework it and delay the production to replace one character by a female character and change the race. So there you go. That's straight. That is straight from somebody who is part of all of the process of creating these things. Somebody who gets all of this stuff a year in advance. Yep. They work on it. They work on the toys.
Nobody has an issue with Diego Luna, who's a phenomenal actor. playing Andor. Nobody has an issue with Moses Ingram, I believe was her name, for playing Reva. Capable actress, right? The problem is that when we look at what gets fans ticked off about it is that they now inherently know when they see Disney do this. It's a reflex at this point. People realize they're not doing this for anything other than checking a box, as this source has now confirmed, a diversity chart. You can only have this many white folks in it. And if one of them is Latino, all the better, because that satisfies both Hispanic and white. They can go off and they're you know, we're going to just lump them together. But that's what they're doing now. And people just have a reflexive reaction to it as, you can't see anything but that anymore. It's not that people are seeing everything as racial. It's that Disney is, Lucasfilm is, Hollywood as a whole is, let's be honest. And people are just now recognizing it for what it is, and it's turning people off.
There are going to be people who view the video or who read our tweets, who communicate with us, who assume the absolute worst in order to justify their position or to hold on to their belief system. And those people exist. The people who want to assume the absolute worst, they just exist. But the truth is that you and I both want to see people of all backgrounds, all creeds, all races, all ethnicities, every background empowered and represented. And we want to see great actors. We want to see great writers from everybody. But here's the problem. The problem is that how you get there is important. And the way that Disney is attempting to get there seems to be through running this through some formulaic system that is flawed, and it's not natural. It doesn't create natural results. It's anti-art, even, I would say. When you have a system that says, oh, we can't do a story about the three main characters of Star Wars, including Luke Skywalker. We can't have Darth Vader, Obi Wan Kenobi, and Luke. We can't have that. And you say, well, why can't we have that? Everybody everywhere wants that. And you say, oh, I'm sorry, that doesn't fit in our formula. Well, that's stupid. That is just incredibly stupid. And so that's what we're speaking out against, I think. Do you agree, Valiant?
I would agree. The formula itself is stupid. The formula is based in something that is superficial, that the vast majority of people just do not give a damn about. But when you set it up in such a way as to preach to your fans and to wag your finger in their face, you know, and everybody recognizes the superficiality of what you're doing, Lucasfilm, that's what turns people off. I mean, what they're engaging in these days is it's just sad. And I mean, it's like it's this common, frankly, mental disorder of Hollywood that they have just fallen into these days. I don't know if they'll ever get out. I hope they will. I mean, it seems like the money is starting to speak. And it may take a few years, but hopefully they're starting to listen, because we are seeing the box office change, quite a bit on some of these bigger films that they're trying to do this with, because people are just looking at this going, it's just more generic junk. And it's just not worth our time and money.
Well, generic junk does seem to be that which formulas produce. You need artists. You need creatives to create. And you certainly don't need people who make the stuff like what we've been seeing, like the She-Hulks out there, where they're actually just using the property to attack the fans. But we need creatives who love the properties. We need people who love Star Wars. We need people who love the Marvel characters. And we need people who will create naturally characters of all backgrounds, of all appearances, of all abilities, and regional areas that they're from. And we need that authentically. We don't need to go back and retroactively change characters that are already set and people already love so that we can meet the quotas. That to me seems to be a backwards step. And I think the merchandising partners are beginning to agree with that.